Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Seeds of Liberty podcast, episode 14. Today, we're going to discuss peaceful means to counteract tyranny in your everyday life and what's the best way we can achieve voluntarism and anarchy the quickest. So, before we talk about that, we'll hear about the BIPCOT license from Jeremy.
Yes, the Seeds of Liberty podcast is now covered by the BIPCOT no-gov license. This allows reuse by anybody other than governments and the agents thereof. You can find out more information about that at bipcot.org. That's Bravo, India, Papa, Charlie, Oscar, Tango.org.
So we're going to talk about what are different ways to maybe nullify unjust laws, although we could argue that all laws are unjust. Some may be redundant, as in, murder is illegal, theft is illegal, rape is illegal. Some are outright stupid, such as suicide is illegal. and then the outright unjust laws, such as most victimless crimes, which constitute, the entire tax code and drug laws and, various regulations.
Crimes against the state.
Crimes against the state, right? Which actually the word crime is something that only pertains to the state. So if you really want to say what's a true crime, you can't really use the word crime, right? Crime, I think, pertains only to the state.
Yeah, originally it had to do with kings, right? I think that's where it derives from. It was a crime was an action against the king.
Right, yeah. So violation of a person's civil liberties, perhaps, so freedoms.
Yes.
So Larkin Rose did a great rant recently talking about how what would happen if some kids engaged in start a lemonade stand, and then you had armed people right there defending them if some agents of the government were to try to shut them down. And how would that turn out, right? Because I mean, it's very difficult to say. Would they call back up and forcefully subdue everyone, and maybe even start bloodshed and all to shut down a lemonade stand? Like it seems very absurd to think like that. Or would they just back off because most cops don't run into a dangerous situation. They're not like the brave law enforcers that we see depicted in Hollywood movies, right? That they like to portray the image as being. So it seems like to me that they'd be more fearful as to their well-being rather than really trying to subdue people, as in what happened in the Bundy ranch, right? Where people really took a stand and didn't allow them to take the guy's cows away.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, that's a pretty good example of seeing what can happen when you have an organized effort like that. My dad, actually, who's in town right now, was one of the ones who was there at the Bundy Ranch. Yes, he got to know Mr. Bundy, I believe. Correct, Pops? Yes, you know Cliven. So yeah, they when you do that, when you show force like that, then chances are, especially if the news is involved, they're going to have to back down because they don't want to let people see what they're capable of. But I think in the scenario of the lemonade stand type deal, being an armed escort like that would probably invite the possibility of hostilities. I think more so people just surrounding the lemonade stand, not even necessarily being armed, or at least having maybe a couple people having concealed weapons. But just like that incident, I think there was one recently in Florida where the cops tried to arrest a guy for having an open container, and a crowd of people was like, yeah, no, we're not gonna take this, and they literally surrounded the guy and were like, no, we're not gonna let you take him. And the cops had to back down because now you have a crowd, now you have now other onlookers are staring at this, and it's like, what are you going to do? Are you going to arrest all of these people now? Are you going to shoot these people? And they have to back down. Now, I mean, you've seen in other incidents where the cops have had to lose face a little bit, something like with the Eric Garner case. Afterwards they ended up harassing and finding a reason to arrest the guy who videotaped it. And that happens a lot too. So like they'll you know, if they do back down, there's a good chance they'll try to find a way to nail certain people later on. But I think in general, you know, there's been a couple of these cases where people have just made a human shield around an individual because they were literally doing nothing wrong. They were committing a victimless crime, and I think that would be more successful on a more regular basis, and I'd personally like to see it happen more often. You know, I'm actually, since I've been hearing about these stories, I've been trying to seek out people locally who'd be willing to partake in something like this with me, because I'd be willing to do it. You know, why not? It's a great. I think it's a peaceful means of resistance. You know, we hear stories of years gone by where there was civil disobedience, and you know, people try to do that. Well, why not? Why not us? Why not now? You get enough people, and you make a point, and I think it could really work. You know, like I said, I think taking guns to the lemonade stand may invite more trouble, but I'm not necessarily going to tell people not to do it either. If you think that could be effective, it's basically creating a little militia, and it may sound silly to some people, but how ridiculous is that these little kids are getting harassed by cops in the first place and being told you don't have a permit to sell this stuff? Like, really?
Oh, it's the land of the free, though, right?
I have the permits to prove it.
Yeah, right.
I am free.
No, like you saw how much news attention the Bundy Ranch scenario got, right? Imagine the same scenario over a lemonade stand. That's like, to me, that's like the biggest molehill out of a mountain. Like, how much money is, like, the government spending what, 12 million a day in Iraq alone, or Afghanistan alone? How much money is the little girl's lemonade stand taking from the state in tax money? Like, it probably wouldn't even be worth that officer's time. Like, the time that officer spent shutting down that lemonade stand, they lost more than they could have ever reaped from that girl having a lemonade stand open. We're not talking about a business on Main Street right here. We're talking about a lemonade stand in someone's freaking yard. All right? It's just ludicrous to think that, you know, it's someone's neighbor called.
Well,
like,
of course.
The cops didn't come out there anyway. So, like, there should be open accountability on who's reporting things to the police, in my opinion. That would shut a lot of this stuff down. You can't submit any anonymous tips. Anything anonymous is discounted and thrown away. You have to put a name, your freaking everything on it. That way the neighbors find out who's calling on their daughter. The whole neighborhood can say, "Look, if you call on us again, shit's going to happen. You're pushing the buttons here. This is aggression. You calling the cops on peaceful interaction."
Well, I think in a free society that would work. In the current system, well, I mean, obviously, number one, it wouldn't happen. Number two, I don't think it really could in the current system, only because that's kind of a blanket statement, because the whole idea, I mean, obviously there was as usual a good intention behind the anonymous tips originally, because there were situations where people were literally afraid to go to the police because they were threatened. You know, something happened to them.
But now cops can call in their own anonymous tips.
Well, no, again, that's what I'm saying.
Which is just pure bullshit.
Well, yeah, it's another example of the state starting out with a good intention, and then it gets abused, and then everybody. So I get what you're saying, but I don't think you could say nobody who makes anonymous, because what if somebody had something happen to them or a friend of theirs, and they were threatened and intimidated, so now they don't want to go, and their only recourse, even in a free society, if you had private security, you know, if your only recourse was to go to people and try to be anonymous, just protect yourself. So in most cases, I think you're right, but I think there are those extremes that unfortunately you can't just say that nobody should call anonymously. But I think the bigger issue is that you're right, that somebody most likely did call because they thought it was being a nuisance. But I mean, I remember growing up as a kid, you know, I mean, obviously at that point, doing stuff like that was probably almost 30 years ago for me. But, you know, you used to be able to do it all the time. And the sad thing is the officers in question can hide behind well, it's just the law, and they're not doing it to punish the kids. They're doing it to be consistent. But we know that to be a bunch of garbage too, because almost every, as far as I know, every officer in every precinct in every state has a discretionary policy that they're given. So there isn't this, consistency. There can never, we've discussed that before. There can never be consistency. There can never be equality under the law, because once you give the law enforcement officers discretion, then the equality's gone. Because somebody who's rude to them, maybe they will treat more harshly.
They're not robots. Yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying that they should be, although Dave, you have made that point before. That's
I would prefer it over.
Well, of course, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. It's nice when they look the other way, but you can't have that equality. So people that are going to hide.
Plus, every cop is a liar, right? They either protect a liar, a known liar, or they lie themselves.
Yeah.
They and if I mean, just according to the book, I think Harvey Silverglate, the three felonies a day. if they were strictly enforcing the law, we would all be in prison, right? Because every single day we all commit felonies, right? I mean, every single person that goes over the speed limit should be arrested and imprisoned, right? But of course, discretionary policies, right? So it's kind of funny that they target kids with a lemonade stand. It's like I think the epitome of a peaceful situation.
Yeah, I think it's BS that a cop, cops carry around this knowledge that if they follow someone for X amount of time, they can eventually find probable cause to stop you. That's too much power for any one individual to have. I can't follow someone and say, hey, I think they did something wrong now, and pull them over for no reason with a gun in an emergency situation. Like, that doesn't make sense to me, how they have that power. And that's why I'm one of these kook crazies that thinks the police should be disarmed. I mean, if all they're doing is tax enforcement, which is almost every law that has no victim, the ones that are hunting the ones that have victims, arm them, but don't arm the ones that are out there enforcing traffic laws or running a beat that having a presence, etc. They don't need a gun.
Yeah, well,
if they need a gun, they find a house, somebody has a gun, and say, hey, I need you to come help. I'm getting harassed for stealing from people.
Yeah, well, disarming most of the cops would definitely be good for my business, because the canine community would see a boon and there wouldn't be as many of them dead. So.
Right. You're killing my competition, literally.
No, it's not my competition. It's my customer base.
Customers, right.
So, I think I mean that may be a little extreme, because that's disarming.
I mean, I think cops should be abolished. Number one. Yeah. So if we can't have them abolished, we at least need them disarmed. They shouldn't be able to just roll up and shoot somebody because they have earbuds in their ear.
No,
that's certifiable bullshit. Mm-hmm. No one should be able to walk up and shoot somebody and then it be plausible that they may get off. They should be shot as well, in my opinion. I know two wrongs don't make a right, but I don't really want a society full of murderers.
Yeah. I mean, you take the guns away from then you're taking the teeth away from the dogs, and then I think most people will kind of understand that wait, why do I have to listen to what this guy says? He doesn't have a gun, so I'm just like him, right? Maybe he has a stick, but I can pick up a stick, right? But once you have law enforcement have most of the guns, and then you enact further gun control regulations and laws, and you further reduce the population of people who have who are armed, and you have a disproportionate society of armed versus unarmed, and it's a situation that's ripe for abuse and democide and fun stuff like that.
Every mass genocide in history has followed from disarmament of civilian population. Every like by the book, every mass genocide.
I think they all read Larkin's book, How to Be a Megalomaniac.
How to Be a Successful Tyrant.
Yeah, right.
How to Be a Successful Tyrant. I never actually read it, but I did listen to his podcast where he read it.
When he was reading it, I just got the chills. Like, it's so creepy how well he knows the mind of a tyrant.
Well, he wrote that when he was still a when he was still an admitted minarchist, and
I know.
he was just getting over, because he referenced the Constitution a lot in there, in a positive way.
Yeah.
But he was still that close to it. But many, I mean, I know the three of us are like that. Most of the people we encounter are the same way. You tend to, you know your enemy because you once were the enemy. And the closer you are to that, it's easier to remember how they think and
That's why we're so
they
good at
react.
debating minarchist.
Yeah.
Like, we were minarchists. It's like, I know every one of your... It's like being an ex-communist. I know everything you're about to say, buddy. Like,
Right.
I understand. And, like, it's like if you were a Democrat your whole life and then became a Republican and you got into a debate with a Democrat, you know everything they're going to say.
That's me. I did that.
So I was a Republican my whole life. So if I run into a Republican, it's very easy for me to destroy everything they say because I once held those beliefs dear. So, but
Well,
this whole peaceful, like, armed resistance, not like I'm gonna shoot a cop if he walks up and does something, but this, like, scenario of people just stopping cops from arresting people, I think is a beautiful idea. I mean, no one's stopping these police from arresting a murderer, right? Like, no one's stopping, like, if someone's raping someone in their neighborhood and the cops get them, they're like, no, you're not taking this one. Like, they want murderers and rapists and thieves. They want them out of society. But when the cops are the murderers, the thieves, and the rapists in society, it's very hard to get rid of them because everyone, even the people that were in the Baltimore thing, the police basically have done a work stoppage. They only do, like, they sleep in their car all day because if they get out they could get killed, and they're like, all the people in town are like, oh god, cops are not doing their job anymore. Like, people do whatever the hell they want now. It's like, why not let the free market fix this scenario? Why not open up, destroy the police monopoly that's in Baltimore? Let's just take Baltimore for example. Destroy the police monopoly and let other private security agencies, and there are many, go out there and try to think of how many jobs that would create for those communities.
Well, I could see that happening. You just look what's going on in Detroit right now. They have at least two that I know of where private security agencies have popped up because the entire city pretty much collapsed with their bankruptcy. So it's possible and it could work, but that's got to scare the bejesus out of the law enforcement officers in those areas and the surrounding areas because, they may say they're afraid, they don't want to deal with this stuff. And, I saw a lot of stuff, especially in Baltimore, where, after the police basically said, well, we're not going to do anything for right now. If you want us out of here, fine, we're out of here. And then I saw a lot of cops and pundits and stuff saying, well, this is, you wanted them out and now this is what you get. It's like, well, yeah, they say that, but when their jobs are seriously threatened and their pensions and their paychecks are threatened, then all of a sudden they'll be singing a different tune. So
Right.
that's the problem. Like, you asked why not let the free market? Well, because that would just ruin everything if we let the free market
So
in.
we have Medicaid, right, and Medicare, and all these state-ran, essentially, insurance companies, and we also have Blue Cross. We have United Healthway or healthcare and all this. And they do a much better job than the state ran. It's not free for the person who's getting the service, but like the state ran versions are, but they provide a much better and much more comprehensive coverage. So wouldn't that translate as well to security? Like, the problem is that police don't provide security. That's not their job. Police are there to enforce the law. And you have to, like, that's probably one of the first basis of realizing that the state's all bullshit, is this monopolized protection agency, which is the police, the law enforcement officers, are not there for your protection. They're to maintain peace, because if things got crazy, tax bases could get destroyed, right? And they're there to enforce the laws, which are just opinions with guns, edicts from our masters. So they're not a positive on society.
Dave, you were talking about before about the, no one would complain about the murderers, rapists, and thieves getting arrested, but what happens when the law enforcement themselves are the murderers, rapists, and thieves?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. They are.
Yeah. So then you have the problem, right? Where
they're human too. They're not some
Exactly.
special breed of human that
Exactly,
doesn't
yeah.
rape, steal, and murder. Like there are murderous cops. There are raping cops. There are cops that steal.
they're one step above the ordinary. They're given power, but somehow they never abuse that power, right? So. Well, I remember Larkin Rose made an interesting comment. He was about people who think that there wouldn't be security without the, police, law enforcement. And if you think about, the very, specified different kinds of things that people sell, like like he gave the example of an apple cutter, or I don't know,
Yeah.
something really insignificant. Like people make money selling that, and you don't think that people would want to make money and providing good quality security and protection without law enforcement? Like you really think that there would be a vacuum there? Like nobody would think that they could
There's
make a
a
successful business
thriving
model on
market.
that?
There's a thriving market for heated toilet seats. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Like, and that's like the most minute, like, freaking, like, ridiculous shit, like, that is non-pertinent to sustaining your life as possible.
Listen, man, you live in Alabama. When you live in New York winters, heated toilet seats are a little more important than you think.
Oh my God, I understand. I understand, but
it's a necessity.
security is a little bit high. You have like shelter, food, security, and what, like happiness would that be after that?
Yeah.
So like heated toilet seats is way down here on the
in
list.
New York, heated toilet seats is above happiness, right?
Oh yeah. No, they're directly intertwined.
It's what causes happiness. Heated.
But no, like yeah, Larkin hit the nose on the head. And it's basically just a different version of my ice cream parlor scenario. Like there's how many places in your town can you go get ice cream?
Yeah.
How many? Like every grocery store, almost every burger shop, the ice cream shops, et cetera, et cetera. You can get it at freaking Taco Bell, but yet there's no way that private security would have a market. No fucking way in the whole world. Ice cream, that's feasible. That makes sense to me, but not me living every day safely. People make no sense to me.
That's too much to ask, Dave. Come on. Ice cream I can understand.
Well, that's the whole. I hate government and I don't trust them, but we should only give them the important things to do. That's because people don't see past that. But that's why I think measures like this peaceful type resistance can be very beneficial for multiple reasons. Not only can it get innocent, peaceful people out of quote unquote trouble with the law, but it can also start fostering a sense in the community that this occurs in, that wait a minute, maybe we don't need these particular police officers for everything, especially if you take it to the level of the armed protection, or maybe like what's going on in Detroit. They're being left alone because the cops have just all cleared out because most of them aren't getting paid, and the rest of them are like, and the rest of them are like, I want nothing to do with this, because some areas have become ridiculously dangerous, but the other ones, these agencies have popped up, and that's that's the thing, that's a real life, real time, right now scenario where people, if they can pull their heads out of their rear ends long enough to stop thinking about the stupid distractions that keep it get put in their face, and actually look at that and say, wait a minute, here you go, there was a need. The police force fell because they ran out of money. There was a need. What happened? Somebody stepped forward, and not even just somebody, multiple somebodies stepped forward, because there's at least two big ones that I've heard of out there, and I'm sure there's more forming now. That is what the market does. That's how the process works. Left to its own devices, problems need to get solved. People are stupid. Individuals are not. People as a whole, a group. What's that
Let
line?
me play
What's
devil's
that line
advocate.
from Men in Black? Something about people are big dumb animals, but on their own they're okay, because they're not. People, they want to be secure, like you said. They want to feel like there's protection. So if the police force just up and left in your town, I'm pretty sure within rather short order, armed people would get together and say, hey, we need to do something about this. You know, there's plenty of towns across the country that still have neighborhood watches. You know, what is that? That's a group of concerned citizens that doesn't feel that they're getting enough protection from their local police department, or something's happening that's not being addressed. So they took it upon themselves to do it. You know, that's just a small scale thing. And most people wouldn't even think of that as a form of disobedience, but essentially it is, because the police have a monopoly wherever they are. They have a monopoly on the services they provide. If you do anything that clashes with what they're supposed to do, technically you are disobeying them. You know, so it could start as small as that. And you know, because I get, not only do I get tired of seeing these stories in the media about these, you know, these poor kids with their lemonade stands. You know, there was one even worse one. It was last year or a couple of years ago, maybe, where there was a kid who set up essentially a free library in front of his house. He had like the little book stand that he put next to his mailbox, and it just basically said, you know, if you want to donate a book to this, donate it. If you want to take one to read it, please just bring it back when you're done, just so the people in the neighborhood could read and learn.
Nice.
And the cop shut it down because he was he was running a library without a permit. Basically, it's like free. He wasn't charging any money.
It wasn't, the cops didn't shut him down, to correct.
The town did. The
town. No, it wasn't the town. It was the zoning manager and the building. You know, like
they're the town.
Property managing, etc.
They're the town, dude. I deal with them here all the time. I had the zoning department try to.
They said it was a structure and it needed to be attached to the house or behind the house or something. Yeah. But that's what the hell is my mailbox? Because it looked about the size of the mailbox.
That's federal property, son. Your mailbox doesn't actually belong to you. Once you put it on there and put it ready for mail, it's federal property.
Let me play devil's advocate, right? Detroit goes tits up bankrupt. I mean, they are, but they're still kind of propped up from certain things, welfare mostly. But their cops go completely kaput, right? All these private defense agencies come in. They secure it so well that businesses want to move back in. So therefore, people want to move back in to work in these businesses. At what point does the police department open back up?
Yeah, I mean,
if they want to, as soon as they can.
yeah, I think that.
So does the private defense agency shoot itself in the foot by providing a superior product? If a monopoly with force can come in, you know, a lot of liberals don't understand that. They're so anti-monopoly, screw big business, and then they don't realize that government is the biggest business of all. So
the biggest monopoly.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So. Yeah, but yeah, like, what do you think about that scenario? Do you think that's a plausible thought?
I mean, I think the people have to, I mean, they have to understand how much better the Viper, you know, whatever private defense agency would be providing, you know, as a alternative to, you know, to law enforcement, and hopefully, you know, they'll get educated into the you know, the beauty of the free market and voluntarism somehow. Hopefully, one can only hope that it won't slip back into the same statist, you know, destructive paradigm that produced the whole collapse in the first place, right? Otherwise, you're just going in circles. But yeah, that's the challenge, is, you know, that, you know, we have to show people the gun behind every piece of legislation, right, including lemonade stand. I think I was reading an article a few months ago about all the regulations that a lemonade stand has to comply with in order to be
in California. Was it in California? I think it was like 50.
I'm not sure. Is it 50?
Yeah, in California, to open up a lemonade stand, it's like 50 regulations.
Yeah. So it's just it's really absurd, and I mean, I guess some people say, you know, you know, not all laws are good, but for the most part, you got to obey the law. But I'm like, but still, they don't understand, or they're not processing the fact that okay, you know, we can take away this law, but it's like that. We're not getting at the root of the problem, right? The root of the problem is we are giving a select group of people, you know, unlimited power to make whatever legislation or law go into effect that we all have to follow unquestioningly. And in the meantime, while it does get, repealed by voting or, ballot measures or whatever, peaceful people are imprisoned and caged. And are people really willing to, to take that, very slow path towards, towards a better world? Like it doesn't make sense. It's just,
Yeah, like drug prohibition is like shooting the government shooting its tax base in the foot. Think about if drugs were legal, and all these people that are locked up for drugs would be working in the drug business. Let's just guess that. Let's just say that only half the prisoners that are locked up, so 1 million, give or take. So that's 1 million tax-paying citizens that you're putting in jail doing nothing. That's a welfare. You're essentially creating a welfare problem that you then have private interest, judges, lawyers, bankers, or banks propping up these prison corporations, propping up police. It's propping up all this other stuff, and it's just still taking from society and never really giving back. And it's just like, that's just one law. That's just one DEA. The DEA was made with a stroke of a pen. That's cost us more than, $1 trillion, which is like, people hear the word $1 trillion and they, oh, okay. Like, you can't fucking conceptualize $1 trillion. Like, you really can't. Like, you honestly, it is impossible. Like, if you was to see $1 trillion bills, you would, like, your mind would go, what am I looking at here? It's like the Twin Towers stacked up twice. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, the way I explain, the difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion is, a million seconds ago is 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks, right? And I think a billion seconds is 31 years, and a trillion seconds is 31,000 years. So I say, 1 trillion seconds ago, there was no human civilization, right? So people can kind of understand, because, yeah, you're right. We tend to, people's mind goes numb, and, their eyes glaze over when you say, oh, yeah, we're in, $18 trillion of debt. But what does that mean? What does that mean to anybody? It doesn't really mean anything to anybody. But,
I can buy a Big Mac for $1. Okay.
Yeah, McDonald's is a special this week, so all right. So, you gotta say,
no, like, people are willfully ignorant, and they lie to themselves. I truly believe an anarchist isn't someone who accepts this new basis of rationale. It's someone who quits lying to themselves with acquired knowledge. Once they acquire knowledge, they don't allow themselves to lie to themselves. So that's what you have. You have a bunch of statists, and let me use that in the pejorative. You have a bunch of statists walk around. They don't want to hear these things. They want to lie to themselves. Ignorance is bliss. I don't want to see the underside of this. It's like I say a lot of the time, it's hard to see outside of the empire. But when you're out of it, it's real easy to see what's going on in the empire.
Well, to get back to your devil's advocate question, I just wanted to say, I think you've seen that on a smaller scale. I think there was a town or two in Texas that did this, and there was a couple other ones somewhere in the South where the police force left for whatever reason, budgetary constraints, or the people got fed up with them and they fired the whole police force, and then they hired smaller private security, and it's working. And a lot of the naysayers will say, oh, that's just on a small scale, but I think Jeff Berwick has talked about this too, about in Acapulco, where the same thing happened. Like the traffic cops and another section of the cops down there went on strike because they wanted more money, and nobody noticed they were gone. And a couple months later, when they finally started to notice, hey, these guys aren't around anymore, then the cops were like, well, now we want to come back. We decided we'll take the money now. And they're like, people were like, no, we don't want you to come back. And yes, that's Mexico, but it's the same principle. That's what we were getting at before about what, you asked, how long do you think it would take? I think it would really depend on the area, and it would depend on if private security companies had popped up already, and how effective they're being, and if you get enough people that can recognize that and see, hey, things are actually calmer around here, and we're not paying, we're not being robbed constantly to pay for this stuff. they may fight back and say, no, we don't want you to. Now, like someplace as big as Detroit, if the government is allowed to keep operating, then most likely the police force will come back and they will force these private companies out, or maybe try to convince some of the more accomplished members of these companies to come work for them now or something like that. You know, like,
Oh my God.
well, because once the politicians get back into the full swing of things, they'll start up their propaganda machines and point everybody to the bad locations. Say, well, look, this is still happening. You still need us, and enough people are scared. But if it happens, you know, in smaller areas or even in that bigger area, if it happens and the market responds quickly enough, then, you know, people will start to recognize that. And I think that's another way that, you know, you could just, that would most likely have to be started in small areas, but you know, you do that. You get together with a bunch of people and say, we don't want to do this anymore, and find ways to fire the police force, or find ways to, you know, cut it off on a local level, and then once they're gone, institute something better and show people. You know, we talk a lot about the problems and what we see, you know, and Dave, you just kind of hit on it with, you know, once you're on the outside, it's hard not to see this stuff. And a lot of the times, a lot of the objections that, you know, I deal with personally, and I know a lot of us do, is, you know, well, you're not providing any solutions. Well, here's some solutions. Let's start taking this stuff, like literally. You see, like the conservatives and the Tea Party members, and even some people on the left, they're always chanting about, you know, they need to take this country back. And it's like, well, okay, I don't particularly want to take a country back. I mean, I equate a country to a nation. And I know I was actually challenged on this by one of our former guests at one point, that if you look from the etymology standpoint, country actually had nothing to do with government originally. It actually literally meant like countryside type stuff.
Yeah, but things change.
But a nation. So like, I don't want to go back to that. So I don't want to take my nation back. I have no interest in that. But take your community back, and not to take it back to a level of government, but to show people, like, you know, get out and do these things. That's why, like I said, I'm seriously trying to find people. You know, if any of our listeners are on Long Island and would like to help me out with these roving human shield type deals, get in contact with me. I would love to start something here locally like that. I'd like to see that type of stuff happen more often.
If you get on the news and you don't say theseasofliberty.com, it's really not worth it. You know
I will be screaming as they are pepper spraying me and beating me with their batons. You know, that's what I'll be screaming.
It'd be kind of hard for them to do that when you have an AR-15 in your hand, right?
Well, again, I'm not saying that I'm going to be armed or not going to be armed, but I see, especially here in New York, it'd be much more beneficial to have a group that's unarmed, because anybody with a weapon is a target for the police, because you don't see a lot of them in open, because we don't have open carry here, because it's not allowed.
I don't know why there hasn't been somebody test New York State's laws about guns, especially New York City, because every gun law in New York City is flat out unconstitutional. And who was the guy that shot the three guys in the subway and got acquitted?
Oh, I forget his name. Was that Reginald Denny, or was that somebody else? I think it
might have been.
Well, yeah,
but like that's like he would have gotten killed without that gun.
Yeah, well, yeah, but a lot more often you'll get killed with it, you know, especially if you get because the cops out here are, you know, they're a little trigger happy. Even though they know most of the people they deal with are not armed, because they're not, quote unquote, allowed to be. But I think, you know, I'd like to see more people start up, you know, a lot more people opting out of the state in different ways and saying, well, screw the regulations, I'm going to start my own private security company, regardless of what they say. And even if you have to start small and just start building up some trust in your neighborhood, and just be like, yeah, we want to do this. And you need to show people that these things are possible, because
there needs to be an app for it, like the Amber Alert app.
Well, honestly,
Danilo's getting assaulted by an officer for smoking weed. You know,
that's what Peacekeeper actually was designed to be. It never took off as much, because that's another Cody Wilson project, right? I believe Peacekeeper.
Cody Drummond.
Oh, Cody Drummond.
Yeah.
It's a great idea, and it's getting your neighbors, your friends, your family that live close to you more involved, and so you don't have to go outside to the police or whatever, you know, and rely on them when they're not going to be much help, because most of them, you know, as you said earlier, Dave, they're not there for your protection. They're there to protect the state. They're there to protect the interest of the state. They're there to enforce the state's laws. You know, that's why the whole serve and protect that is still ridiculously written on half the cop cars across the country was, I mean, it wasn't even a matter of the Supreme.
And serve.
It wasn't even a matter of the Supreme Court eventually ruling that no, they don't actually have to protect them. So they never were. It was never about that. I mean, sure, some cops in some smaller towns may have thought that. Some cops may have always believed that's what they were there for, but it was never their job, because they were there to be the enforcement arm for the state and be a separate class of citizens, because they are. Once you have the power to enforce these things, you're in a separate class. And they're going to fight because they, you know, they make their money. Their entire lives are subsidized, so they're going to fight tooth and nail to make sure they're needed. You know, I mean, that's another angle I could see. You know, Dave, you going back to you asking about what would happen in Detroit if they came back, like, you know, I wouldn't put it past, especially the police unions in a scenario like that, to go out and start trouble to try to prove to the people that they're needed. Like,
yeah,
you know,
history would back that claim up as well.
Yeah, they're not gonna relinquish their power that easily. They're not gonna relinquish their essentially free ride.
But like
I've
pensions,
said that before.
Like the problem with cops is
the problem.
There's multiple problems, but one of the largest problems is they become unionized, right? So then you have this entire monopolized security force for your town that can just say, you know what, we're not doing it. We should be, in my opinion, illegal. I am saying there should be a law against police strikes, right? If we're all forced to pay for them, they shouldn't be able to say, we're not doing it. So you have these unionized, right, with basically impunity. Then they get pensions and the best health insurance on God's green earth, and then so you have this huge problem with it's not economically viable because they don't produce anything for the society. They only take. And then you mix that in with Supreme Court cases that prove over and over and over again that the cops aren't there for your protection. They are not obligated to protect you. They're obligated there to protect state interests, like you said.
Of course.
There was a great Julie Borowski post that she did on her Facebook page. She said,
"Really?
What would you do? What would you do if the laws were suspended for one day?" I don't know if you guys saw this one. And the top comment was like, "I would open a lemonade stand without a permit."
Yeah.
And then it's like, "I would drink raw milk. I would add an addition to my deck without a permit." All this stuff, and probably like I would smoke a joint, all that stuff. but it's just funny how a lot of people understand that I guess maybe they're mostly libertarians, but they understand that the victimless crimes and every law is an opinion backed by a gun, but then at the same time you talk to some really diehard statists and they're like, well, we gotta obey the law. If it's a law, then there must be a good reason for it to be there, right?
Those runaway slaves.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. Well, I was gonna say that's become my favorite Jimmy Russell recently, when somebody throws that law, the law is the law, and if you would just obey the law. Like there was another post, I think it's from that stupid American Strong Facebook page, was circulating again, and they've got quite a following apparently. Although every time I see their post, it's flooded with people like us who are just trolling the hell out of them. But that's my comeback to these people. It's like it's true though. Again, if you think of it logically, saying that well, it's the law, so you got to follow the law. Well, okay, then that is an admission that had you lived in a different time, that you would have been turning in chattel slavery, chattel slaves, or the Jews, or anything like that. That you, in order to be consistent on any level, to say the law is the law, then if you had lived in that time, you would have had to obey those laws. And that's just a very twisted way of thinking. I mean, obviously, the whole statist mindset and paradigm is set on twisted thinking, because you have to convince yourself that things are not the way they actually are in order.
Well, I don't think
to...
it's convincing. It's indoctrination.
Well, it is, but we were talking about earlier about how people, it's not just a matter of they don't see it. It's that willful ignorance, because they have to turn those blinders on.
The thought of a police officer's job being right or wrong has probably never crossed 90% of people's minds.
No, I think I think depending on the circumstances, I mean, it usually takes something hitting close to home, or maybe something out of the ordinary that gets slipped into media that people see it, but they quickly fall back on, even if they start to have those thoughts, they quickly fall back, because it's that, well, they've always been here, what will happen without them? You know, so that's what it is. So, you know, but that's what I now lead with when it comes to that, you know, the law.
Well, they're going to find out. They're going to find out what it's like to not be here when cities go bankrupt because they can't pay these pensions and all these government workers that work for them. They go tits up, you know, like New York may not ever go tits up because it's got the largest stock market in the world in it. But, you know, cities like Detroit, all the businesses got out because of the economic policies of the area. They went tits up. You can't pay the cops. So we found out what happened. So
yeah. Well,
you're going to find out people are going to find out in this nation, and I'm making a bold claim here, probably within the next 10, 15 years, what it's like to not have these so-called false safety nets that they believe are in place by the government. Oh, I got accidentally pregnant. Okay, my state free health care will take care of me and my child because I chose a bad action in life.
It was an accidental pregnancy, right?
Yeah. And yeah, those happen, but I mean, it's, you know, because there'll be no subsidized abortions, right? Because like 90% of abortions are subsidized. You know, and all these Black Lives Matter. Well, the number one race that's getting aborted out of oblivion is the African American race in this country. So if you're sitting here saying Black Lives Matter because a cop goes off the rails and kills one or two black guys every month, there's 20 billion times that happening every year. What was it? 56 million black aborted fetuses in 1 year?
Yeah.
Like, that's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah. I just wanted to say before we end, you know, other peaceful means that we could counteract tyranny would be, you know, one of is trying to nullify unjust laws, and then you could also have, you know, just agorism, just trading, you know, in the black market or the gray market, just, you know, unregulated outside of, you know, off the books, right? You know, paying in cash, which I believe is actually on the way out, right? Cash is starting to be eliminated as well. So they're, you know, trying to crack down on that. But, you know, using Bitcoin, right? Using precious metals, you know, bartering, you know, perhaps, which not always easy, but, you know, can be done. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to peacefully opt out of the system, and you know, they all have their merits, and I think they're all useful, right? So there's many ways that you can peacefully counteract tyranny.
I think practical agorism can choke out, especially local markets. People are just like, hey, City of Commerce, we're not registering with you. We're not even official business, but we're just going to do our thing over here. And you're not taxing us because we only take Bitcoin and silver. So unless you want to send the tax man to come pilfer our coffers, and you will be met with violent resistance, I don't see it happening for you. Yeah, well, and when the town can't pay their police department, then the police department goes.
Well, I just wanted to say on that point, now that you bring it up too, I think the problem I see with you know, the projection you gave of like 10 to 15 years, is it possible? Yes. I kind of worry about that a little bit though, because that's always the thing with me. When that collapse happens and people aren't ready for it, then you can end up even worse for a short time, because people will be scared and panicky. That's why I'd rather people start getting into this stuff now and start preparing themselves for that possibility, or even if you want to call it an inevitability. You know, I mean, obviously it is an inevitability because that, you know, what's
It
that?
is an
Well, I was
inevitability.
gonna
Like
say,
it's
what's that?
going to
Well, of
happen.
course, because that
Like
falls in.
calling someone a tinfoil hat for saying that the dollar's going to collapse is there. You're not thinking straight.
Well,
The
no,
dollar is going to
that's
collapse eventually.
that ties into that old you know, Margaret Thatcher line about, you know, the paraphrase of, you know, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money, and that, yeah, that's exactly what happens, and that's what you saw in Detroit. You had those policies that eventually you ran out of other people's money because people ran away and didn't want to live there anymore, so you lose your tax base and you can't afford all these pensions and stuff. So that's why I think now is a great time to start putting these things into action. And I also agree with you, you know, the agorism route. You know, I did that with my company. That's what I, as of the beginning of this year, I started taking in that direction where I'm working my way out of the system. I never accepted credit cards. I don't accept checks anymore. I prefer to I barter with some of my clients. I take gold and silver. You know, I still have to take cash because that's what most people deal in. But, you know, if there's a way for you to do it, and there's always a way. There's, you know, a lot of people say, oh, well, I'm stuck in this job where I have to get paid and I have to pay it's like, well, no, there you always have a choice. You can find a way out of it. Is it easy? Not always. Is it readily feasible? Not always. But if you really want to make these changes, then yeah, it's a good route to take, and start trying to find other people that are willing to trade with you, even if it's for, you know, personal products you need, food. You know, I mean, right now I deal with a local, you know, food co-op. That's where I get my food from. You know, my fruits and vegetables, like that right there. That's another form of like anarchy in action, where people are getting together and you know, and you're you all chip in and you all, you know, you all help this little company grow, and you don't need the state for any of that. You know, so you do stuff like that. You know, you find other ways to do
Is the co-op like a subscription thing?
uh well, what do you mean? Is like, I signed up for it, and they
Oh,
deliver food every 2 weeks. I give them money, and every 2 weeks
okay.
they come drop a big
Because
box of food at my house.
I think I've seen a co-op where it's like you know, you have a restriction on how much you can take out, but you just pay a flat out subscription fee to come there every week.
Yeah, no, there's ones like that too. Just here locally, for me,
Okay,
it just
I was just asking.
oh no, there are ones like that. Mine just happens to be, you know, it's a little distance away where they're located, so they deal with the surrounding couple of counties, and you know, you give them a flat fee every week or every 2 weeks, whatever you want to do, and they just fill up a giant cardboard box of as much stuff as they can pack in it. You know, but like I said, that's a form of, you know, that's a voluntary interaction. We're dealing with them, and I don't need the state for that. So there's all these things you can do. You know, people complain that they're stuck in their jobs. Well, find other things that you're good at and start your own business, and don't worry so much about, you know, it always comes down to fear. People are afraid of crossing the government too much because they don't want to get in trouble.
Would you
Well,
suggest forming an LLC or no?
no, 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 no. I actually I had one, because when I started my company, I obviously was still a hardcore statist and never thought about these things. And when it was first brought to my attention, it was like, oh, this can protect you. You know, you get special legal protections. And at the time, I said, oh, that sounds wonderful. And now I look at it and go, oh, it made me a separate class of people. No, I don't want that. I don't want special legal protections. So I actually am in the process of dissolving my LLC. I mean, I'm
I knew
obviously,
the answer to the question. I just wanted to ask you.
yeah, no. I mean, I obviously will not tell people what to do, but a recommendation, I would recommend against it. You know, again, you have to do what you feel comfortable with. I am somebody who's willing to push the envelope a little bit. You know, I've talked about it on other shows. I challenge the traffic laws a lot. I challenge, not, I try to be as polite as possible, but I challenge officers when I see them. I go well beyond that 3 felonies a day thing, because I'm sure I'm committing tons of them with the stuff that I do. Because, you know, it got mentioned earlier about the, you know, with the Julie Borowski thing about the, you know, what if one day all the laws. Well, you know what? Instead of asking yourself, what would you do if you had one day with none of these laws? Start living it now. Start ignoring, just flat out ignoring as many of the laws, regulations, whatever they are, that have no victim attached to them, and just, you know, take a stand. You know, it may not be for everybody, but the more people that start doing this, the better things will get. the quicker the end will come if more people, I've made that analogy. What if there was an election and nobody came? What if there was a tax day and nobody paid? They can't. Once that happens, once there's that, it doesn't even have to be everybody, but more and more people just start doing things on their own, and again, showing others what's possible, showing others that you can live a life not abiding by all these stupid laws and regulations, but you could still not hurt anybody, not aggress against anybody else, and still lead a very happy and productive life. And I think that's
and
the
if
key.
you really, really like taxes, the next year when you go to pay your taxes, make sure to not claim any deductions or any dependents or anything. Like, pile on as much and then write an extra check just for good measures if you really, really enjoy what the state's providing you. That's what I tell people when they give me if we don't have taxes, we wouldn't have roads, et cetera, et cetera. I say, okay, well then why don't you just step your game up and pay more taxes? If they're that necessary to your life, step it up. Quit being a puss.
Donate some more.
Donate some more, yeah. Like, put your money where your mouth is. The problem with socialists and anybody that believes in, communists, because socialism is a wing of communism. The problem with communists is they always think it's someone else's money. They always think it's someone else's property. They never think of it as theirs. So they have this real problem with putting their money where their mouth is, or putting their property where their mouth is, or the product of their labor where their mouth is. So yeah, if you want to pay more taxes, go do it.
So I'll give my final comments. I think one other way that I've heard even some volunteers say that they are contributing to the end of statism is actually accepting get government checks. Because like even teachers or even some ex-military people I've heard, they say they actually think they say, if I accept a government check and I use that money towards voluntarist means, right,
buying silver,
or ends, or it's better that I have that money than is used by the military or so it's better that I have it, right? And just the fact that statism is an inevitable collapse. It's an inefficient business model because it's not even a business, so it is destined towards collapse. So by accepting it, it's accelerating its collapse, and also by opting out of it is accelerating its collapse. So both ways it's doing so, although some people would say it's immoral to accept it, but then they say, well, the funds are stolen, so I didn't really do the stealing, but I'm just accepting it. but
that'll get you put in jail.
That's a post justification, but
we should put every government worker in jail for receiving stolen property. I get it now.
So if you guys want to give any final remarks, or you just want to...
I love you guys. I love this show. If you want to help support us, check out our website, theseedsofliberty.com. If you want to suggest a guest for us to have on, if you want to suggest any changes to the show you would like to see, please do so. And, follow us on Twitter, follow us on Facebook. Check us out everywhere you can. We're going to be working on that Patreon site soon. Just be happy. Be happy. I tell people that all the time, and they think it's I'm telling them to climb Mount Everest. It's like, no, just be happy.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
How far did you walk for water this morning? Like, when was your last meal? Okay, then you have nothing to bitch about. Be happy.
Yeah, I would just say that it's tough to be happy when you're on this side of the fence and you see everything. But I think Dave's right. He's got a point. Because I think part of the reason that we wanted to talk about what we talked about tonight is because a lot of times it's easy to get down and just point out all the horrible things that are wrong. But that only goes so far, and then eventually you're in an echo chamber talking about that, and that's all you're talking about because nobody else wants to listen to you. Well, if we want to see what we look for to happen, we have to start changing minds, and it starts with yourself, and you could do it with your children. But if you want to hasten things up, then getting out there and being a little more positive and giving, not just trying to spread happiness, and spread these ideas, but also spread these possible solutions and just try to find some more like-minded people, and try to just encourage others to see the possibilities. That's really all it is. You know, most people are stuck in the paradigm because they don't even want to think about the possibilities, much less, you know, put them into action. But if you could show them that these things can work, you know, that's the reason I did what I did with my business. You know, I have clients that have been with me since the very beginning, so I've known them for almost 10 years now, and I was very open with them about why I'm doing what I'm doing. And you know, I got a lot of weird looks, but I also got some people that wanted to ask me questions, and I said, I basically want to show other people that this is possible. I want to show other people that you can work outside of the system and still be successful and still provide a service and still, you know, be competitive and then not have to worry about all the other BS. You know, I mean, you may have to duck the agents of the state every now and then, but if you're willing to deal with that, then go for it. So get out there, meet some people, find some friends who want to be a human shield with you, whatever the heck it is. just get out there and start instead of sitting around and bitching about it and thinking that you can't do anything, because I thought that for a long time. But instead of sitting there thinking about it, prove these theories. Go out there and show people. Go show yourself that it can be done. And you know, it's a powerful thing. You know, it takes a
small, tiny, little bitty, almost barely seeable spark to burn down an entire forest. Yeah. Literally, all it takes is that little bitty spark.
Yeah, I like Jeffrey Tucker's the quote about you know, if you really want to improve the world or spread anarchy, find something that you're, you know, skilled at and passionate about, and be the best that you can be in that. You know, start a business, add value to society. That's how you spread anarchy. That's how you spread love. That's how you improve the world and raise the standard of living for your fellow man. And like Dave said, you know, it's all about love, and it's about happiness, because statism is a doctrine that's founded in fear, right? Fear and you know, hatred for you know, or fear of your fellow man, of other religions, of other cultures, of other, you know, nation states, right? It's always about fear of the unknown, right? The monsters that other people might become, but through believing in statism, we become those monsters that we fear other people to become. So it always happens. Yeah. So thank you very much, everyone.
I want to plug a website before we end. All right, zerogov.com. Check it out.
Yes, hopefully we're gonna have Bill Bupert on here in an episode quite soon, so we're looking forward to that. So thank you everyone for listening. This is the Seeds of Liberty podcast. Wishing everyone have a wonderful day. Take care.
Peace.
Bye.
Peace.